Independence for a Change in Connolly to 3 Bomuchugat.
Minister, I understand that a trade agreement in our name is to be signed by the EU Commission on the 28th of October, having been given the thumbs up by this government. Unbelievably, it's a trade agreement that hasn't been discussed in this chamber, hasn't been put to vote, and in reality hasn't seen the light of day in Dáil Éireann. Indeed, it has been left up to voluntary groups, community groups, trade unions, local authorities and other NGOs to inform us of this matter and to bring it to our attention. This far-reaching agreement, known as the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement between the EU and Canada, the agreement that dare not speak its name in this chamber. Fortunately, the public-driven awareness campaign throughout Europe has alerted us to what's going on, and there are serious concerns expressed by Germany, Austria, Hungary, Belgium, to name but a few of the countries in relation to this trade agreement. Moreover, and intrinsically related to CETA and its application, the European Court of Justice is currently examining the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, another new generation deal. And the ruling from this case, which is significant, Minister, is expected in spring and shall have a significant implication and consequences for how CETA is applied. Indeed, the Minister for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation herself has acknowledged, and I quote, "The outcome of this case will impact on the scope of the provisional application of the case of CETA." So effectively, Minister, this government is planning to allow the Commission, in our name, to sign up to the provisional application of this agreement next week and find out what that actually means in the springtime. I realise, Minister, that the government is under pressure from the European Commission President Juncker, although you did stand up to him for the apple when it suited you, and who is on record as saying that the credibility of Europe's trade policy is at stake. I would say clearly, Minister, that what is at stake is the credibility of our democratic system if the government allows such an agreement to be signed. In this regard, as you are aware, a recent Red Sea poll commissioned by Uplift, and it's of help to you, tells us that 74% of the population of this country who still believe in democracy want a referendum, not just on CETA but on TTIP. Moreover, the Seanad has passed a motion calling on us not to sign this agreement and, more importantly, calling on us to uphold Article 29(5). And I'll quickly read it, Minister. The article sets out that the state shall not be bound by any international agreement involving a charge upon public funds unless the terms of the agreement have been approved by Dáil Éireann. Clearly, allowing in this agreement for businesses and companies to sue states will certainly have serious implications for the public purse. In the circumstances, Minister, I'm asking you, as a Democrat, to not sign up to this agreement and, moreover, to immediately instigate a debate, frank and open, in this chamber. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Deputy Connolly for her question. I suppose it's important to bear in mind that well over 200,000 Irish jobs are directly dependent on our trade, and in the face of Brexit, which is going to put pressure on companies who are selling into the UK market, it is very important that Irish business gets access to other markets, such as the Canadian market. And this is an agreement negotiated between the EU and Canada to allow greater entry, for example, for Irish dairy produce into the Canadian market, which have been blocked out, as you know. Also for many other Irish companies selling manufacturing and other goods. That the Canadian market is a good market. It's one where we have a lot of common knowledge and understanding of the trading approaches, and it's an area where I think Irish business will use the opportunities that are raised by the removal of non-trade barriers, the reduction of tariffs, to allow Irish companies create employment, and that's going to be important in the coming years. We do need to be a strong trading economy to work our way out of this agreement. So in principle, the agreement with Canada, with the US and with any others, they are to be welcomed. Of course, we have, as in any negotiation, have to make sure that our interests are protected. And there have been particular concerns raised about, for example, the dispute mechanisms around investor agreements. And I understand that they have not been carried through into the Canadian agreement. There is going to be amendments in those sections, and they have been agreed by the trade ministers. So this trade agreement will come to the House in the usual way for debate when its details are finalised. And that is the approach that has always been taken in these agreements. Under EU law, the EU Commission is responsible for negotiating, but they do so in an increasingly transparent way. And I think under Commissioner Malmström, the Swedish Commissioner, she has made huge efforts to make sure that groups such as trade unions, community groups, get access to those papers in a way that they can understand what's being negotiated. But in the long term, a trade agreement is good for a small open trading economy like ours. We do need those markets, particularly in the light of Brexit. So I think we need to look at the detail of this, not leap to the conclusion that any trade agreement is bad. We depend on trade agreements. We have many overseas companies investing in Ireland because of the openness that we adopt to trade. So I would ask the Deputy to suspend her judgment on this until we see the final document, the opportunities it presents, and see that we do protect ourselves against any risks, which there are always risks in any negotiation.
That's exactly what I'm asking for, that this matter not be signed, not to sign up to something that we know nothing about, and that we bring it before this. Is this CETA agreement on such thin ice that it cannot withstand free speech and free debate? Is that what you're saying with new politics in this stall? I'm asking you not to sign up to this on the 28th of October, to bring the matter before us so that we can discuss it. It is disingenuous of you to say that trade agreements, that we need them and that they're good, and to suggest that we who raise questions are not behind trade agreements. I'm absolutely behind trade agreements and creating jobs in this country. In fact, there's a crisis in the regions because of lack of jobs. This has nothing to do with that. This trade agreement is opening up to neoliberal policies without any regulation, opening up our public services and making it extremely difficult for us, if we change government in the future, to go back and put them back under public ownership. At the very least, if you want to stand by this, bring it back before us and let us discuss it in an open and fair manner. And finally, Minister, I'm horrified to learn just before I spoke that it would seem a French MEP has been refused entry to Canada because he was going to speak on this agreement. Now, I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but that's what's been reported. And if it is, it certainly indicates how difficult it is to raise any awareness on this trade agreement.
Minister.
I think it's important to recognise that this agreement, from even before the negotiating started, guaranteed that no public service could be interfered with under the terms of the agreement. It guaranteed that there could be no diminution in either health, safety, workers or other rights as a result of the agreement. It provided for protection for a lot of the things that people are concerned with. Now, of course, there has been agreement which will open up sectors. So Irish food companies will have opportunities, including food companies in your own area, will have opportunities to trade into the Canadian market, and that is to be welcomed. And I think the Minister has been very alert to the concerns that have been expressed in this House, and there have been debates on these agreements before your own time. But this is, this has been an issue for some time. As you know, it's been negotiated over a number of years. So the Minister is very alert to those, as are other ministers, and there have been modifications in the agreement to take into account public concerns. So this agreement will come back for ratification in the House as normal, and I think the Deputy will recognise the value of it.